again, thank you for being here, first of all. And I certainly appreciate what you do, knowing a little bit about you. Like I said, anytime we get someone that's involved in feeding us, I'm very thankful, because without you guys, it'd be a hell of life would be a lot harder for sure. And your mission uh, to take care of high quality nutrition is much appreciated. Anyway, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I can. My name is John Pallagi. I live in the north of England in a county called Yorkshire, the biggest county in England, and in North Yorkshire, which is the most beautiful part of Yorkshire. I come from a food background. I used to own restaurants. I opened and ran a small restaurant group across the United Kingdom. And then I diverted into digital and selling food online, which is the company Farmison. Farmison's 10 years old last February, and Farmison is a made-up word. It was a play on the word Amazon. We wanted to be the meat specialists, as Amazon back in the day with the book and CD and music specialist. Also, the name is also set up as Farm is Online. And that's another marketing play on the title. We sell meat direct to consumer. So we buy from farm and we break the product down, and then we either manufacture or recut, and then we distribute that product out direct to the home cook's kitchen via a courier. And we also supply into some of the leading retailers and restaurants across the United Kingdom. So we supply people like Harrods, Fortnum and Masons, the Tate Galleries, Liverpool Football Club, Middlesbrough Football Club. And then we've got about 200,000 home cooks across the United Kingdom. Up until the dreaded word Brexit, we used to supply into Europe. We used to supply into about 21 European countries. Again, domestic chefs, domestic home cooks who'd buy our product. Our specialism is breed. So we work specifically on and work with farmers that are breeding traditional breeds, and that's across all species. So, for instance, in this country, we've got similar to the great food nations of Italy, Spain, and France, who have the ancient vines when it comes to wine. We have the ancient bloodlines when it comes to livestock. So, for instance, in America, you will eat Black Angus, which is the bloodline of Aberdeen Angus on beef. You will eat Berkshire pork, which is the bloodline of the Berkshire pork from Berkshire in the United Kingdom. And I can give you many, many other examples of that. And what happened, the reason those things are globally spread is largely down to the Victorian era. And we took livestock around the world, and as the Victorian Empire grew, we took livestock around the world, and that's why pretty much 70% of the world's meat are bloodlines from originally from this small island over the pond. I'm the CEO and the founder of the company. I'm 52 years old, and my passion is travel, food, wine, and football or soccer. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Sounds extensive. So the cattle behind you, I'm just wondering, they maybe look a little bit like maybe Highlander cattle, but I'm not sure what
You're a good spot. They are. Yeah, this is wallpaper. We've got cattle. We celebrate these wonderful animals. When you think about cattle, in particular beef, good beef takes up to 48 months to get to its right time. Unfortunately, across the world, in America and in the United Kingdom, we kill animals too young. We waste a lot. And these beautiful creatures behind us. When you taste a Highland steak versus, say, a Dexter steak or a Shorthorn, and they've all got different tasting palates and different tasting notes, no different than drinking Burgundy or Barolo from Italy. It's very similar. I always compare them to how the great wines are tasted and the difference between them. But yeah, they're Highlands from up in Scotland.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to taste the Highland beef, not from Scotland. There's a company in the United States in Colorado that produces those animals. And they do have, and you're right, that each different breed does have a different taste. And I think if you eat a lot of beef like I do, you can certainly come to realize that. It's pretty interesting. So let me ask you more, so I know you talk about having a mission of providing better beef. What does that mean to you?
Well, the mission is eat better meat. And so what we're really talking about here is flavor, first and foremost, followed very, very quickly by a sustainable diet, i.e. ethical meat. So, raised in the right way, low on antibiotics, only giving antibiotics when an animal is distressed, killing at the right age, in the right environment, in the right way, humanely slaughtered, and ensuring that it's butchered properly. Again, when these animals behind me have lived the life they've lived, and the farmer or the producer has got them to this beautiful level where it's ready to go to slaughter. The respect for the product is so important. We're a little bit, I think, in maybe the Western world, a bit flippant with food. We take food for granted, in my view, and some other parts of the world are less fortunate, and we should never forget that. We waste too much food. But eat better meat really is a phrase that we've used from day one, and it represents a better way of eating.
Yeah, I mean, your point about wasting food, I think in the United States, I think something like fully 40% of the food we produce ends up in some form or fashion into landfill for various reasons. Sometimes it's at the consumer end, but very often it's just in the production end. And I think that's if we want to solve, world hunger or feed the world, when we get to 9 billion or 10 billion people, I think the biggest part of that is to stop wasting so much food. And so, and I think my understanding is the meat and dairy industry are a little bit better with regard to waste in general compared to, say, fruits and vegetables, but there is still some waste that occurs. And so how do you, when you talk about not wasting as much, doing it your way, how does that work?
Yeah, so it can work in many different ways. So first of all, inspiring the home cook to reuse leftovers. So, reducing that element of waste, ensuring that, there's a lot more muscles within an animal and a lot more cooking techniques required. We can talk about a flank or a flat iron versus a fillet. In the United Kingdom, or Great Britain as we like to be known since Brexit, in the United Kingdom, we're a nation of fillet and chicken breast, and they're the two most unsustainable cuts to eat. I mean, we're killing so much poultry just for the breasts. Yet anyone who knows meat, the most flavoursome part after the parson's nose, the most flavoursome part of a chicken is the thighs. They're soft, they're juicy, and they hold the same protein content, and and the fats around them are positive fats, not negative fats. But we as a nation are at times too servile in this part of the world, and we like fat-free, perfect chicken breast, perfect size, perfect depth, and all the nonsense that comes along with factory meat. And the same with the fillet. You only get 2 whole fillets per animal. And think about the amount of fillet steaks sold at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night in a professional kitchen. Why isn't it the rump that has 7 different muscles around it, and the rump pave, the picana, or the cap, as you might call it? And so there's a lot of education around required around eating meat, I think, in certain nations where maybe our Italians, French and Spanish take a lot of eating and using the whole animal much more for granted and use the whole animal. I often call the most important part of the animal the 5th quarter. Get the 5th quarter right in terms of what we do in our warehouse and within our fridges and our maturation, i.e. make things out of the things you can't sell as a primal, manufacture it, but make something flavoursome. Don't waste it. And those are the elements really, Sean, that we try to promote over here as a company.
Yeah, I mean, as my culinary skills have improved over the last several years, through a lot of work and effort. I found that I can just about take any piece of meat and make it something quite delicious. Sometimes it takes some more time,
Sure.
smoking, sous vide, things like that. And so I have I've got a lot of tools in the tool chest for that. And I think that's something that, like I said, I realize a lot of ranchers, they particularly we have, in the United States, as you're probably aware, a monopoly, a couple companies run the entire meat business for the most part, particularly the beef business. And you have these direct to consumer ranchers, smaller ranchers that are trying to make it. And they've struggled because, everybody wants the primal cuts, the fillets, the ribeyes, the sirloin or the New York strips. And then they end up getting stuck with a bunch of ground beef or roast that no one wants to eat. And so it makes, if you can buy a side of beef and use a whole animal, you can do one. It's more economical. It helps both people out, and it's you can definitely make some really good stuff that way for sure.
100%.
What is so I mean, I can't help but notice, and I'm sure you notice it too, but in the UK, I keep seeing, articles from, I think, The Guardian or Daily Mail talking about how we need to tax meat and how meat is awful for the environment, and how, we need to drastically cut back on our meat consumption, maybe as much as 80 or 90%. Are you getting that? Is that you getting a sense of that? Is there I mean, how much are the farmers and ranchers pushing back on that? And do you think there's any room to try to kind of change the narrative?
Yeah, there is room to change the narrative. The narrative is in part correct, in part. We shouldn't have 100% meat diet. That's not a healthy way to eat. It's about balance, and there's a place for a vegan diet. There's a place for a vegetarian diet, but it's about balance, and balance isn't just about what you put in your mouth and you taste and swallow. It's about how much exercise you do. It's an overall a lifestyle choice. The Guardian's a great example of a newspaper that is constantly to the left, and will position articles because of reasons away from flavor and health, but more because they believe or don't believe in the killing of animals. And you use the environment at times use the environment as a smokescreen towards that. I'm a cynic at times when I hear a lot of the arguments around the environment. There's definitely decisions and choices we can make, but believe me, in our wonderful country, if we were to take our beef off or our cows off some of the wonderful fells and dales we have in North Yorkshire, well, the whole ecosystem would fail. You need the cattle in the fields, especially chewing the grass, turning the wildflowers, turning the insects. And if these things don't work, the cycle stops. So there's a much more fundamental argument around the environmental impact of meat and meat eating. I think there's an argument to say eat better, but eat less. But that doesn't mean reduce your meat intake by 80%. On the contrary, it just means eat better and eat less. So maybe do have a little bit more of a maybe fish diet or a vegetarian diet if you're eating meat 6 or 7 days a week. Maybe just reduce it a little bit, because we can't, as the population grows, we don't want to be forcing more and more factory meat, large ranches or farms as we call them, purely growing cattle, killing them really early just to force a demand for a beef burger at £1 or $1. There lies the problem.
Yeah, I want to just mention that, I know you said there's a place for vegetarian and vegan diets, but we've got people like myself. We are eating a purely meat-based diet, and we're doing well and we're thriving. And so from a health standpoint, we appreciate that. Now, when we talk about, and I've talked to a lot of people that are involved in sort of regenerative agriculture, and what I see is, instead of the typical 16-month slaughter age, which we see a lot of places doing, particularly in the U.S., you may be out closer to, 2 years, 3 years. But I think once you kind of get a flow going, you're still going to be culling at the same rate. I mean, you may delay a year or two, but if you continue to have cattle go through there, you're able to do that. And my understanding is, particularly people that do multi-species grazing, the same amount of land can be very productive. In fact, it can be almost as productive or more productive than the traditional feedlot system, depending on where you are. And I assume there's some very beautiful grazing lands in the UK, particularly northern UK, where it's, and I've been to Scotland and the northern UK before. And I think that you can't, and I'm not promoting that everybody should eat a meat-based diet. I mean, there are some health implications and health reasons why people find it necessary to do so, at least for a period of time. So we do have that. So I just want to push back on, if you say there's a place for veganism, then there's a place for carnivory. I think that's fair to say. But I mean, on a global scale, yes, we have to figure this out. I don't agree that making these highly processed meat analogs out of canola oil and monocrop pea protein, or even the real factory meat, the synthetic lab grown meats is the answer either. And so I think I think if we stop wasting meat, like you'd mentioned, or wasting food in general, that's going to solve much of the problem. And then if we, instead of spending all our time eating garbage, we treat ourselves like human trash cans. With the food quality we have, we would eat a lot less food. We would require a lot less food and therefore a lot less resources if we just focused on high quality nutrition, regardless if it's from plants or animals, in my view.
Yeah, and your point around tax as well. I mean, I've got a very strong view on tax, which is going to be published shortly in one of the, in probably the London Times, actually, on an opinion piece. That I'm a big believer that one of the challenges, specifically around diet and food, is eating seasonally. And, again, our great food nations in Europe, Italy, France, Spain, I've just come back from Spain only last week. And everything is about eating seasonally and eating when it's ready. We as a country, and I'm sure America is similar to a degree, although you've got much different seasons around your country. We fly things in from Kenya just because we fly avocados in from Israel or from Turkey, and out of season here, and then we're flying it around. So my view is that I'm starting to build a campaign that will be taxing a seasonal food tax that's applied to our big retailers that want to try and throw food at us that's out of season. And there's seasonality attached to meat. Let's not forget wonderful English spring lamb, or the game season that's just about to start here, which is the deer season, the venison season, or goose at Christmas, and turkey at Christmas, Thanksgiving. There's lots of seasonality attached to meat. But what really cheeses me off is when we're flying product all around the world to service a demand that the large retailers have created in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for eating locally, for sure. And we see that, some of the diet recommendations, particularly as we get this belief that we need to eat a rainbow of food and we eat a plant-based diet. And then you ask, well, where do I get that food from? And much of it doesn't even grow on the same continent, and you're trying to figure out how human beings could have ever done that, even 100 years ago is next to impossible. I'm sure there's not mangoes growing in the northern UK, and yet they would be very much recommended on the diet there. So let me ask you about, again, about the sort of the flavor of the meat. One of the criticisms of one of the things that American beef is praised for is the marbling and the fat content, and again, that comes at a cost with the way they finish out with a partially grain-based finishing. Can you get that same sort of level of fat or marbling with strictly pastured animals? Is it possible?
Oh, we're entering a dangerous conversation around who's got the best beef in the world. So I have strong views on grain and grain-fed beef. I think that you're producing a product to feed an animal, to feed a human, and I think we have to be careful around that. We're spoilt here in certainly in the North Yorkshire area and cross into the Irish island and then further up into Scotland. We've got some of the best grasslands in the world, full of really interesting nutrition, lots of grass growing on limestone rock, limestone footpaths underneath. Again, lots of minerals coming through. And because, and it's not just what the animal's fed on, it's the genetics, the breeds. So I sell one of the oldest breeds in the world, White Park, a stunning. We sell Gloucester, we sell Dexter. I can go on and on. There's some amazing breeds. So don't lose sight of the breeds. I put that to one side at the moment because, as we've already said, you know, you've tasted Highland and there is a difference, but the feed is an important part as well. And I believe that you can't get the full 100%. There's no such thing as 100% grass-fed. Most animals wouldn't survive on 100% grass-fed, especially the outdoor. The wilder cows, like the Highlands, that even carve outdoors. So there's an element of winter feed that has to be given to it, you know. And I join my farmers frequently on winter feeds just to ensure I don't forget out with the tough terrain some of our animals grow up in. But the flavour is everything, and flavour doesn't just come out of the feed, because what I find really interesting about American beef, and I've been to America many times in all the great cities and ate some of the most amazing food. The American beef is very what I call soft, and what I mean by that, it chews down really softly, and ours, when it's on the purebred element, it takes a lot more, a bit like Galician beef from northern Spain. It's a bit older, it takes down a bit more chew, and some people don't like that. But it's my comparison is always with old world wines and new world wines. And when you drink a Chardonnay from Burgundy versus a Chardonnay from the Sonoma Valley, then there's a very distinct difference in that taste. And I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other, it's different. And I actually personally prefer the Californian Chardonnays than I do the Burgundy, you know, the home of the classic. But so there's different flavors for different people. But I believe that the old world beef, as I call it, in our world, when we're selling our purebred stuff, it's a different eating experience. I believe that the flavor hits you a lot later in the throat, so you get a bigger beefer flavor in the throat when you deal with the purebreds, and that's one of my big ambitions, is to get some of our beef out to some of the great kitchens across LA and New York, down into Miami and Chicago and Dallas. I want to get some of our beef out there. And I've actually been out to meet some chefs. Unfortunately, our trading agreement's not open yet, so we can't sell beef to you. We buy your beef here, but we can't sell it to you. Hopefully that's coming soon. And I want to be one of the first in America demonstrating these great delicacies we have.
Yeah, I think your point about, it's not just what they're finished on, but also the age of the cattle, the breed of the cattle, perhaps the sex of the cattle, the time of the year, and all those things are going to have an impact on the flavor. And your point about the chew, and I've had all kinds of beef as well, and I appreciate all of them. I like them all, quite honestly. I mean, there's some that sometimes I find them a little better than others, but I think you can get the experience you want, I think, almost regardless, if you know how to cook it correctly. Like I said, I think there's a lot of ways to make a grass-fed beef very, very tender, if that's what you like. And I think that's something that is very, very interesting.
Like Japanese beef, Japanese beef is a great example. It's an occasional beef, the Wagyu. You're not going to live on Wagyu. It's too rich. It's a very extreme example compared to, say, some of the beef that is sold, that I've tasted out of Heritage Meats out of New York, which is a small supplier out. I know Martin there, Patrick Martin. Well, and again, different flavors for different people for different occasions.
Yeah, I would concur. I've had the fortune to have some of the really high-end Japanese Wagyu, and it is an occasional thing, but I wouldn't want to eat it every day. I think I would lose the appreciation for it, and it's something that you know, I think it's nice to have, but there's a lot of other cuts of meat out there, and not just beef. Obviously, there's a lot of other good things out there. Let me ask you about. So there's I doubt you know him, but there's a guy named Glenn Elzinga who does he does something, a company called Olive Spring Ranch out of Idaho. And what he does is he grazes the cows up in the mountains. You know, he's purely outside pasturing, even in the wintertime. And what he finds is he actually goes around, and I think his wife is a botanist or something, and they've been looking at what the cows eat. And they have a very, very diverse diet, and they'll eat flowers, and they'll eat all these high energy plants that they find that they prefer. And he finds that by allowing them to have such a tremendous access to all these different things, it's interesting how diverse their diet actually can be, or what they self-select. And it gives it, and again, it gives it a very unique flavor. I mean, I don't know what, you know, regionally, you know, you said you're in the north of England. Do you find big differences when you say you go to Spain, perhaps, you know, in the taste based on, you know, the earthiness, you know, the terroir.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the key things we haven't mentioned within flavor, actually two. One is maturation, really important point. You know, I mature up to 120 days on certain cuts and certain breeds, but that's dependent on a very important point, the fat covering and the level of fat covering, and a lot of the fat gives the flavor. That's where a lot of the diet goes, into the fat rather than the meat part element of it, the flesh part element of it. And I've been lucky, I've been out to try the Fasone in Piedmont in northern Italy, just near Turin. I've brought that in, and we've sold that out to, we brought a whole carcass in, and we brought that down and sold that out across the UK. And that's got hardly no fat on it. So that's perfect for some of the raw meat eating options that we have. It's perfect for people that are on specific diets that are above and beyond just, I want to lose a bit of weight, but there's a diet that they have to stick to. But it's not beef for me. It's tasteless. It's got, you know, it doesn't have the depth to flavor that has. And the same with, say, the Limousin that comes out of France. Again, perfect and nice and soft, but doesn't have that depth of flavor that other, you know, that I certainly find that that we have in the UK and we have in the US. So I haven't ate a lot of European beef as well as I've eaten out in the US, and I mean, one of my favorites is Uruguay. I mean, the beef out of Uruguay, that is purebred Hereford. They've got the most purebred Hereford, traditional Herefords in the world, Uruguay. And an interesting statistic about Uruguayan diets, their diet, 40% of their diet is made up of red meat, largely beef. They cook on flame, but they cook on wood, not coal. The Argentinians cook on coal, obviously. And they have the lowest cancer rates in the South Americas. And again, they eat red meat every day. And I spent 3 weeks out there, I think the year before last. That's one of the nicest places I've ever eaten beef. And that is 100%, you know, they're outdoors all the time. There may be some winter finishing, but yeah, that's a memory that is stuck with me.
Yeah, I've seen, I've looked into cancer rates in South America, and I do just distinctly remember seeing Uruguay being extremely low on their cancer rates. And I've seen that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Uruguay leads the world in beef consumption, you know, per capita, or, you know, at least, you know, for recognized country. I think, you know, if not, if they're not number one, they're number 2 or 3, but they're very, very high up there. And it is, and I've seen that phenomenon with low cancer rates, which again goes against the narrative that we're being told that, you know, eating beef is, or red meat in general, is going to lead to cancer. And I think that's clearly data that's basically assuming you're on a standard Western diet, which includes all the other garbage, which I think that's really the issue with that. Let me ask you about, do you do much with lamb over there, with lamb? Because that's such lamb. Yeah, I mean, that's something that in the United States, for whatever reason, lamb has always been kind of a minimal beef, and a minimal player in the meat space, but it's so incredibly nourishing and quite honestly delicious. I've gotten into it a lot recently. I lived in New Zealand for a little while when I played rugby there, and I got kind of overdosed on lamb, if you can imagine. But so I kind of stepped away from it, but I finally got back into it, and I'm really enjoying it. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, lamb and the different ways those are, you know, because there's obviously mutton and there's lamb, and can you talk a little bit about the differences?
So my company categorizes lamb as follows. We have suckling lamb, which is basically lamb that's been, and the French eat a lot of this. It's a lamb that's probably no more than 40 days old, you know, and it's literally been with its mum. Then we go to spring lamb in the United Kingdom, and the spring lamb season starts in late April in the south of the country, in the south of England, and finishes off in Scotland late June, and it moves as the weather moves. And spring lamb is largely lamb that's been on its mother, and it's just got onto a tiny bit of grass, and it's killed at a certain age. And then from there we move on to lamb. So which is largely, our definition of lamb is from 3 months to 11 months of age. And then we move on to hogget. And hogget is from 12 months to 23 months, when the second teeth of the sheep starts to come through. And then at 24 months, you move on to mutton. All very different flavors. You know, Prince Charles has had mutton from us. It's his go-to cut is mutton, because it's as natural as you're going to get. It's always outdoors. You know, it's largely the female. It's mothered for 2 years. It's had a number of babies through there, baby lambs. And then that's without talking about all the amazing breeds we have. So I'm about 4 miles from Swaledale. Swaledale is a dale, but it's also one of when you go to New Zealand, I think it's about 20% of the New Zealand lamb is Swaledale lamb. And so I'm literally on the doorstep of Swaledale, where I could walk to it from here, and it's full of pure Swaledale lambs. But we have Massam lamb, which is another breed, which is only sort of 4 or 5 miles from here. We've got an enormous Wensleydale breed, all very different, and all not raised just for meat. Some are raised for the wool. You know, Wensleydale, the eye, for those who are looking at the camera, the eye of a chop on Wensleydale is so small compared to, say, Swaledale, which is much bigger, because the carcass and the animals are a very different breed and a very different build. But the flavor profiles of the different lambs are exceptional, and we are so lucky here. We have more different breeds of lamb than anywhere else in the world. What I love about lamb is the guard of honor. For anyone that might have eaten the guard of honor, and if they haven't, it's worth Googling the guard of honor. It's a beautiful cut of lamb that it's all of it's both sides of the ribs created into like a emperor's hat, and you'd serve that with some pomme de terre and some greens or some salad. That's one of my favorite cuts. And also the lamb cannon, which is the back of the lamb, and it's a lovely long thin piece of lamb, boneless, stunning, one of my favorite cuts. But then you get into the Barnsley chop and the scrag ends, and you get some amazing lamb tongues are stunning. A lot of the Indian cuisines use lamb tongues in the Indian restaurants here. Again, you talking about our early conversation, Sean, about using a carcass balance and getting a sustainable diet out of the animal. So we love lamb here, and it's not just for Easter. We say lamb all year round.
Yeah, I certainly support that. Do you know if in the UK, are you guys, how much do you rely on imported meats? Is it fairly high, or can you be sustainable? Are you a net exporter or net importer, or what is the situation in the UK?
Yeah, on meat we export more than we import. Again, I've got to be careful. There's politics here, because I know the American government are looking to bring bigger portions of meat in, and there's a lot of rhetoric around it's cheap meat and so forth, and so there's a lot of politics around that. But we're at the top of the triangle of quality. You know, we did the beef main course at the last royal family. You know, I went through a number of tastings down at the palace, and so. You know, we're very proud of our meat, but we're not great at waving flags like our friends are over in America. You know, you're much better at selling and waving products. But I think the the real thing, let meat in or let products in as long as they're better than the domestic, but not just because they can compete. I think you've got to, if I'm going to send meat or a wonderful beef to America, I want to make sure it's as good as, if not better than, what you're already eating, not just something to compete with the rest of everybody else. And so I think there's some opportunities around exporting for us. But there's a lot of education still around the genetics and around understanding the breeds, and we've got the whole back catalogue of that. So there's exciting times, really.
Yeah, one of the, and you pointed that, because there was a lot of the U.S. ranchers are pushing back on the imports, and they're very, and I don't know if this exists in the UK, but in the United States, you cannot tell where your beef actually originated. They're allowed to put product of the USA. There used to be something called the Cool Law, where country of origin labeling. So you would say this was a product of the USA, or this is a product of New Zealand or Australia or Brazil or wherever we import from. And most of our imports come from Australia, I think, in a very small part, and Mexico and Canada. But they abolished that, and it was, I think the meat packers kind of wanted that to happen, because then they could mix in meat from Namibia and Brazil at a very cheap price and call it product of the USA. In the UK, is it labeled where? Can you know where your meat is from there?
So the rules, the legality is, and our big supermarket friends, in inverted commas, they only have to measure in terms of traceability, one movement forwards and one movement backwards. So that means where I'm buying it from, is it a wholesaler or a slaughterhouse? And then the consumer is the move forward. My company has 9 movements, and we're the first in the country, and I do believe the world, because no one's proven otherwise. We know every cut right back to the farm. So we can trace it back to the farm. We've invested in what's called an ERP system, which is basically a stock control system. And we measure as product comes in and is checked in, as we bought from abattoir, we then break that product down, and there's a trail system all the way through, because our customers, and the future of meat is this, our customers want to know where everything's coming from. And they want to know it's from a safe place, an environmentally friendly place, a place that deals business in an ethical way and looks after animals in an ethical way. And so we've gone against the British government in terms of what they consider standards. We have things like red tractor and organic and free range. Well, we've got our own charter that is above those standards, which is why we can attract a customer like Princess Beatrice when she got married, or others, because we really do care about every movement of the product. Now, there are some exceptions. We can't trace a sausage when it's been manufactured right back to the farm where that pork came from, but we can track that back to the batch, and which then opens up to exactly where that farm has come from. So it's an important part, and I think it's the future of food. You must be able to trace it all the way back.
There's I've talked to folks, and you may be aware of Alan Savory and his work and the Savory Institute. Perhaps he's fairly prominent, but they've got something called an EOV, or environmental outcome verification system, where they can say this product has actually literally improved the environment, brought back biodiversity. And I don't, as I see things going forward in the U.S., there's going to be more and more emphasis on that, whether it's via carbon credits or whatever. That's just what the policy is going to likely end up being, one way or the other. Is that something that's being talked about or discussed in the UK? Are they looking at environmental impact and saying, hey, a place like New Zealand, they want to be carbon neutral with their agriculture by the year, I can't remember what it is, 2040 or something like that, maybe even 2030. Are you seeing that playing out in the UK as well? We
are. But our climate in this country, we're pretty much zero carbon with the farmers that we use. There's hardly, we're proving it all the time. We're constantly, unfortunately, the EU has created a formula to measure carbon neutrality across meat, and it's been in place for about 10 years. And in my view, it's flawed. And we're proving that it's flawed, but because the data is 10 years old and it's so, and I've talked to professors out of the two great universities we have here. I've been on a number of these types of podcasts where we've debated this, but the way the carbon neutral aspect is measured is just not balanced towards the farmer. It's balanced towards big business. And when you're an individual farmer and you're trying to measure your own carbon footprint, it's so difficult to do that. So that's another reason why I brought and challenged my organization and my senior management to create a charter that we stand for. Part of that is a tick list on carbon neutral impact and what each farmer or producer is doing for their environment, and then we measure it in our own way. So it's a very hot topic, Sean, at the moment, but it's full at times of misdemeanors in terms of guidance and knowledge, and too many politicians are talking about it without enough information about it and making big statements which are then written about and headlined. So yeah, it's a strange one is the impact, but what we try and do is just ensure that we visit every farm regularly, we audit the farm, we work with the farmer, we work with, I'm very keen that you cannot be longer than 1 hour from an abattoir. We want to keep the animal under stress, and we don't want a load of fuel attached to moving the animals around the country. So we're doing our bit in our own way, Sean, but it's not regulated by central government because I think we do it better than them with respect to them.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. A lot of people find that the government sort of makes things more challenging and decreases efficiency. In the United States, the way our system works is largely, we ship all the animals into the Corn Belt, so they go to Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado to get finished, and so they may be transported 1,500 kilometers or more in many cases, which is is obviously a stress on the animals, and it's obviously there's a lot of problem with that, and we don't have we have kind of a relatively centralized processing facilities. Again, the same thing where it's harder to get things processed locally due to USDA regulations, and hopefully there's some pushback on that. Are you finding that, I know obviously you have to be living under a rock to realize we're not dealing with this global pandemic, that a lot of policies and things are being done sometimes hastily. And I know that Boris Johnson has been an advocate of at least talking about, which I give him credit for that, talking about improving the health of the population. It's one of the few leaders I've seen do that. Now, I don't know if I agree with what he thinks is healthy or not, but are you seeing a push are you seeing meat being demonized as unhealthy across the board in the UK like we are in the United States, or is that something that people are recognizing that it is actually a very important part of a well-balanced diet?
The popular press, the popularistic approach to press, yes. The thought out, well-positioned argument from the more credible journalists, no, because they understand. So it really does depend. The Guardian is a very different newspaper than the Times or the Telegraph. Even though they're competing with each other, and you get three very different views, and I subscribe to all three to make sure I try and have a balanced viewpoint across all the political spectrums. At the moment, with the pandemic, pre-pandemic, there was so much noise around the environment and don't eat meat and so much nonsense. Then the pandemic came and that took the headlines. Post the pandemic, what I'm hearing is actually red meat for the immune system has been a bit of a godsend around the current pandemic. And I'm reading a number of articles, certainly over the last 6 months, that are stating that actually eating red meat's helped because it builds your immune system. We know that. We know it's got that solid vitamin D, that that protein spinning off the vitamin D that you can't get from anywhere else. So, the environmentalists and the negative element of the diet side of it's gone a bit quiet, which has been good. I don't know how it's gone in America, but here it's gone a little bit silent. Every now and then we get something, and then I'll make sure that we're a voice. We spend a lot of money on public relations, PR, to ensure we've always got the solid voice and a reliable voice.
Yeah, early on, I think, back, I think February of 2020, right when this pandemic started to ramp up, there was a nice article that was put out looking at the immune benefits of eating meat and different compounds, carnosine, carnitine, and so on and so forth. Several of them, they showed the positive impacts they have in that. And one of the things, and this is mostly within these sort of vegan advocate groups, or they're saying, well, the whole pandemic was caused because we raise animals for food, and and now it's obviously turned out that that wasn't the cause of this, but they continue to sort of blame. Well, they'll blame anything on beef: wildfires, climate change, pandemics, Santa Claus not existing, or whatever. They'll blame that on beef for some reason. So, are you seeing much of that calls for stopping to eat meat because it's causing viruses? Is that something you're seeing? I think I saw something in the UK about they were concerned about chickens harvesting viruses and they wanted to test people's backyard chickens. Did you hear anything about that?
No, not at all. No, I mean, we there's always a small food scare, but I think we've got pretty good practices here. There's always the threat of food scare because you're dealing with live animals. You're dealing with things that you don't know what you're dealing with until the animals died as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. But I think over here, since we had the madness of that BSE crisis where we slaughtered all those animals when we really didn't need to do that, and then got built as such a negative reputation, which is why I can't sell you meat now. There was so many mistakes made by central government during that process, and it was overly hyped. The impact it had on the human, and don't get me wrong, it was a serious issue, but it was made to be way, way, way bigger. And we're still recovering from that. Our reputation was hammered because of that. And you may recall back in the day where you just saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cows just been burning in fields that we slaughtered everything. And but there's always a bit of TB around. There's always a little bit. These are animals that are in the wild, so it's the cycle of life, isn't it? And we shouldn't lose sight of that. But from our perspective in this country, we've had minimal food scares. I think the quality of our farmers and producers, they've had to up the game because the EU's changed now. The farmers aren't getting the 20% subsidies anymore from the EU because that ended in January. And then the consequences of that is the farmers have got to compete more, and that's healthy for them and it's healthy for the consumer.
Yeah, I think, you pointed, early on, you said, we're not very good at advertising like some other folks are, but I think it's important that, at this point, because there's so much counter narrative and propaganda being anti-meat, that I think it's important that the ranchers and producers do step up and let them know that, hey, I produce a healthy, sustainable product that is not only good for humans, but also good for the environment. And I think that's an important, I think that needs to be done. And I realize as a rancher, you have a lot of other things to do and it's a lot of work, no one's taking away from that. But I think unfortunately it's at a point where, 20, 30 years ago, beef would have sold itself because people see the inherent value in it. And now that's being questioned due to 24/7, very well-funded propaganda against it. And so I think it's hopefully most people realize that. I see some people on social media, some different producers out there, and they're making very compelling arguments, and they're showing, they're saying this is how we actually raise meat, whether it's dairy or beef, and this is what really happens, instead of watching some vegan documentary propaganda show, which takes, very, very skewed, exceptions and tries to claim that as a rule. So I think it's important. And I appreciate you coming on here to share this because, you probably would have been just as happy just to press on and continue, working rather than having to take time to do all these media things. So I appreciate that. Let me ask you one last question, because we're almost an hour and I want to be mindful of your time. Because you refer to the for people who don't know, BSC, bovine spongiform encephalitis, but mad cow disease is what he was referring to. And I remember hearing I can't remember when that was, 25 years ago or something like that. But I remember there's older people in England were like, well, I'm 80 years old. I'm going to buy some beef on sale, because I guess there was this fire sale on beef for a while and people were stocking up on that. But I guess I didn't realize that you're still there's still a stigma on UK beef for export, and that really is shocking to me. Since, but I think I don't know how many cattle were slaughtered in the UK. What percentage of the cattle population
I
had to be
don't.
put down?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to misquote anything there, so I don't know. But and you're right, it was about 24 years ago, and it was a lot. And some farms, we lost farmers. They went out of business. It was a terrible, terrible time, and it was a panic-driven. And again, my knowledge is limited, but from what I've read, it was a panic-driven execution. This is how we need to deal with it. It wasn't thought out as well as it could have done. And I don't think it would happen that way again now. I think there's ways and means that do it. I think, in fact, I was reading maybe a year before last, there was a small outbreak of BSE somewhere, and it was curtailed to one small area, dealt with, gone. And I just think it was a panic. It was probably the wrong person, the wrong job, making the wrong decision at the wrong time.
Yeah, I don't even remember how many people actually got sick from that or died during that original outbreak, but it wasn't many. I mean, it couldn't have been more than just a few people.
Tens. Yeah, it's in tens, not hundreds.
Yeah. So it's kind of, the sort of the overreaction to that. Well, anyway, I'll tell you what, John, this has been a pleasure. Can you do me a favor and we do have some people listening in Europe and in the UK for sure.
Right.
So let folks know where they can go to find out more about you, about how to obtain maybe some of your beef or your other animal product, and anything else you'd like to share for information.
Okay, well, I've sent our website there, and people will be able to contact us through that, and then my PA will be able to direct any commentary through. I've got to take my boy to play football now. He's got a trial for somebody, so I'm dashing up north and leaving in 10 minutes. So I can't answer anything now, but as anything comes in through the evening, it'll all be brought to my desk, and I'll get back to as many people. I've really enjoyed that, and if there's anything else I can do in the future, bear me in mind.
John, it was been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And hopefully if I can ever get back to the UK, I'll have to come look you up and check out and have some visitors.
Yeah, you must.
Hopefully I can get it. Hopefully all things work out and I can get it in the US. So that'll be.
You will do soon, I'm sure. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, guys. See you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Join Revero.health for a 30-day free trial to get access to live Q&A with VIP guests, social community meetings, member discounts, low-carb healthcare providers list, forum, workouts, monthly challenges, early access to podcasts, recipes, carnivore diet guide, fasting guide, shred guide, and much more.